Hey, I'm Molly Pesci, and this is Barnes & Noble Tagged. He spent Tuesdays with Maury, told us about the 5 people you meet in heaven, and had us hang on for one more day. And now, have a little faith, because author Mitch Albom is right here in the Barnes & Noble studios. Mitch Albom is a man who likes to play the field. He was first known as a respected sports writer and broadcaster who also draws a crowd for his musical talents. But what catapulted Albom into the literary limelight was the mega-selling 1997 memoir, Tuesdays with Maury, the chronicle of Mitch's time spent with his beloved professor. His first novel, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, is the most successful U.S. hardcover first adult novel ever. His next novel, For One More Day, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And if you have been hoping he would keep writing, have a little faith. It's his brand new book, and Mitch Albom is here with us in the Barnes & Noble studio to tell us all about it. Mitch Albom, you've been tagged. Thank you so much. This means so much for us to have you here at Tag.
Thank you.
Really love your book. So, I mean, Tuesdays with Maury, 5 people you meet in heaven, one more day. Tell us about Have a Little Faith.
Well, this is my first nonfiction book since Tuesdays with Maury, and it came about quite by accident. It took me 8 years to write this book, even though it's that small. And it started when an 82-year-old clergyman who I'd known my whole life came to me out of the blue and asked me if I would do the eulogy at his funeral. And I said, I'd never done a eulogy in my life, and why me? I mean, how am I supposed to do a eulogy for the person who does eulogies? And so I was kind of stunned, and finally I said, well, okay, I'll consider doing it, but I have to get to know you as a man. I mean, my whole life you've been on the pulpit, and you know, I've never been to your house, I've never eaten a meal with you, and so that began these series of sort of visits, which I thought when somebody asked for a eulogy, you think maybe, you know, a month or 2 left, and he ended up living another 8 years till he was 90 years old. So that kind of drew me in on one story, and the second story that's in there is about this pastor in Detroit who I also came upon over the years, who was an ex-con, who had turned his life around, given his life over to Jesus, and then now ministers in a broken down church that's really typical, sadly, of what's happening in Detroit. It has a big hole in its roof that they can't afford to fix, and the rain comes in and the snow comes in, and yet these two worlds, black and white, and rich and poor, and suburban and urban, and Christian and Jewish, couldn't be further apart, you would think. And yet as I moved between the two of them, as the rabbi is slowly dying and the pastor is trying to hold his church together, I was really struck at how they're actually pretty much alike. You know, that we use faith to divide us. I believe in this and you believe in that. But in point of fact, it's actually maybe the one thing in humanity that can unite us. You know, believing in something bigger than yourself, no matter what it is a very unifying thing. And I found that out between these two worlds. And so it's a story of me sort of moving between these two worlds. And it ends with me giving this eulogy, sadly, which I had to do last year when he finally passed away, and all that I've learned over the course of those 8 years about faith.
Have a Little Faith, a lot of the proceeds from each book are going to go to a charity. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's called the Hole in the Roof Foundation, and it was designed off of this very thing. You know, my goal is to get this roof fixed. Yeah. We need $80,000 to get this roof fixed, and I'm hoping when the book comes out and we can get donations from people and we can get this so they don't have to go through another winter with the snow and the roof and the rain coming in. But then we formed this foundation to do the same thing for any church, synagogue, mosque, or anything that takes care of homeless people. To me, if there's a house of faith or house of worship that spends some of its time or effort helping the homeless, and they need help in terms of repair, roofs, windows, walls, anything like that, then I want to do everything I can to help urge those kind of places to keep going. And when I see what this church, if you could come, I wish I could take you now and just drag you there, because when you see this, there was a point in the book which I described where they turned the heat off because they couldn't pay their heating bill. And in the dead of a Detroit winter, with the temperatures in the single digits, you know, 4 or 5 degrees out, you had 80 homeless men sleeping on this church floor with a hole in the roof and rain coming in and dripping on them. And you say, how can this be America? And yet, who takes care of these people? It was a church, you know, and through the kindness of a pastor who doesn't get paid a salary, makes no money, and he sits there all night and watches over these people sleeping. And, you know, you look at these homeless men and you say, that man there, that lump under that wool blanket, that was once somebody's baby in his mother's arms. You know, we all start the same way. How does it come to this? And so I couldn't do a book like this and not try to use it for some kind of good to help organizations that take care of situations like that. So that's where 1/10 of the proceeds, actually, from the whole tithing thing, and not to get too biblical, but, you know, it's there, will go to that.
Wow. All right. Well, the book is called Have a Little Faith, and it is out this week. And boy, we all can feel good. Buying the book is also putting a roof on the church.
Well, and other churches.
And other churches, that's right. It's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much. Here's a tagged close-up. Like a good wine, some books just get better with time. So set the table and get ready to celebrate the 25th anniversary edition of a book with a beautiful bouquet. The Windows on the World Complete Wine Course by Kevin Zraly is considered America's very best and most popular wine course. And now, pop the cork, because this renowned book is celebrating its silver anniversary with newly updated material wine lovers will savor. For this new edition, Kevin traveled to 80 wine regions in 20 countries, tasting more than 4,000 wines and meeting 500 winemaking professionals. Plus, he has updated wine buying strategies, best vintages, and wine lists. Among the handy visuals are wine growing maps and wine labels included not merely for aesthetic appreciation, but for useful comparisons in areas with complicated classifications like Burgundy. Appropriate for professional and layperson alike, the volume continues to be one of the most indispensable titles of its kind. And that's our tagged close-up. Every week, I love to bring you the best new releases in the world of books, movies, and music. This week, we are making some lists. At home with friends, on the road, and in the parks. All in my top tags for this week. A fine balance at number 5 is Her Fearful Symmetry by Audrey Niffinger, author of the phenomenal bestseller, The Time Traveler's Wife. Her new novel is a haunting story set in and around a cemetery that explores love, sisterhood, and the tenacity of life, even after death. Feeling cozy at number 4 is At Home with Friends from Grammy-winning violinist Joshua Bell. In this album, he fulfills his dream of recording with a colorful roster of musicians, including Josh Groban and Sting. Plus, this Barnes & Noble exclusive features the bonus track of White Christmas. On the road to number 3 is Away We Go, out on DVD and Blu-ray. It's a Sam Mendes-directed comedy about two 30-something slackers trying to find their place in the world before the arrival of their baby. Taking a hike to number 2 is The National Parks, America's Best Idea, by Dayton Duncan and Ken Burns. This is the companion volume to the 12-hour PBS series from the acclaimed filmmaker behind the Civil War. The authors recount the adventures and political battles behind the evolution of the park system and the enduring ideals that fostered its growth. And number 1 on my list is Lists for Life by Rory Tahari. Here you will find over 100 checklists and resources for staying organized and reducing stress for big events, including planning a wedding, buying a house, and even raising children. And those are my top tags for this week. Mitch Albom had a little faith, and so do I, that we'll be back next week to tell you about the best books around. See you next time on Barnes & Noble Tagged.